So the 2030 target is of great significance, and it goes back to the clean growth strategy and the potential opportunity for the UK to innovate and progress as a society. Is one of the very few developed nations that they have set up themselves to such strict targets. And Buildings Mission 2030 is very important and critical for the UK, and it is very well aligning with the clean growth strategy and the opportunity for clean growth economy, type of economy to be developed within the UK. What that means is that by optimizing the performance of buildings, we can not only meet our climate change targets, but at the same time it would provide the UK with the opportunity to innovate, create new technologies and export this knowledge to other countries. So in that sense, having early demonstrators and having buildings that they have achieved these targets today, we can very well say that from a technical perspective this is feasible, from a cost perspective this is viable, and therefore we can actually analyze the data we have in place and progress in meeting our targets for 2030. I think we need to say here that it might be a technical challenge or a technical feat, but at the same time it provides the UK with a great opportunity. And it's very important that we align ourselves with such incentives and initiatives, and we have a clear target and trajectory. And this is mainly because of the Climate Change Act and the different elements of that address carbon reduction requirements. So the buildings and new buildings, they're responsible for almost 30% of the direct and indirect carbon emissions of the UK. So if you consider that, managing to address operational energy demand and meeting the 2030 target becomes critical on our journey to net zero carbon for 2050. And this is something that also was highlighted on the Committing Climate Change report that was issued in May this year. And it sets out an aspiration and a vision for the industry to follow, and at the same time it sets out a policy trajectory for the government to be able to actually deliver these very challenging objectives. In order to meet these targets set out for 2030, the Buildings Mission targets, it's very important to consider the role of new technologies, emerging technologies and new tools accelerating and supporting this transition towards a more smart type of construction. In that sense, we shouldn't dismiss both digital elements as well as construction elements when it comes to the building's delivery. We have seen a strong focus on energy efficiency through elements as referred to as modern methods of construction, which actually specifically look at off-site mainly. But at the same time, we have seen the introduction of new applications of digital tools that we have seen applications before in other sectors being applied to the construction sector as well, which means that we have a great opportunity to unlock these elements and deliver optimized solutions for the construction industry. Historically, the construction sector has been not as well developed and adjusted to the new technologies coming through. We had issues with monitoring of performances and looking into the elements that would actually mean that someone experiences a healthy and well-being environment within the building. In that sense, nowadays we have the tools and the methods in place to be able to address those. So in parallel with meeting the 2030 half energy targets, we can actually benefit from these new emerging markets and actually address consumer-centered objectives that will be very critical as we move forward into the future. So the UK Clean Growth Strategy, along with the Building Mission's 2030 targets, are of a great significance when you look at international evidence and data as well. In terms of the United Nations, we had the Sustainable Development Goals, and at the same time we had the IPCC report being issued last year that demonstrated that internationally policies in place might not be sufficient to actually limit the temperature increase of the planet by 2 degrees by the end of the century. So it's more likely to be around 3 degrees. In that sense, and considering the fact that buildings play a very important role in the energy consumption and carbon emissions across the world, and more specifically within Europe, they're almost responsible for like 1/3 of these emissions. Having a target for 2030 as such means that we will be able to collect this data, evidence and information appropriate that can actually drive policy development in the future, which would have the potential to deliver on these goals, and that would actually mean that the UK would actually meet its Paris Agreement obligations and would be on the leading board of developed nations when it comes to meeting such targets. So this is really great. Coming from an engineering background, I can identify the challenges in meeting the Buildings Mission 2030 targets. At the same time, I can see through the opportunities that they might develop by trying to support such a goal. And in terms of new technologies and engineering fits, that's very important. This is an area of work that has been always an issue within engineering practice. Where you have complexity, sometimes you introduce risk. We are a very risk-averted sector. In that sense, these early demonstrators and the case studies as shown within the report are very important in terms of thought leadership. They not only indicate that we can meet with the different obligations set out today, but at the same time they unlock the thinking process behind utilizing all the technological advancements that we have today to achieve these goals. In that sense, we had seen the rise of BEAM methods, we have seen the rise of the use of different sensors within buildings, digital twins and smart systems. So as the future appears to be electrified or electric, because we're looking into decarbonizing the electricity grid, decarbonizing the gas grid, and supporting a transition to a more electric, carbon efficient way of living, in that sense, we have all the technologies in place now to support that transition and to record data. It is quite important that we have established these feedback loops because the construction process can be very complex. We have different processes at the design stage and different processes during the construction stage, and at the end, different processes when it comes to commissioning of the different technologies. When you experience development progressing on site, then you realize the level of the challenge, and this is because of all these processes taking place at the same time. You're outside in the elements, you don't have full control over these processes, and so you cannot standardize as well. Now we have seen the rise of off-site manufacturing, we have seen the use of modern methods of construction, which are likely to achieve that objective by standardizing products, assembling them on site, allowing for monitoring these products and quality assuring these products can be one of these driving forces that will change the face of the industry as we know it today.